here with Martin Schneider. He's our lead of all things that are related to sales, revenue, growth, and of course, he's been one of the experts in CRM and CX for a long time. So you've got a new report out. We're looking at it fresh off the presses, at least the digital presses, revenue intelligence. So what is it? What the heck are we talking about? Why is this category hot? Because I keep hearing it everywhere. I mean, that's not even why is it hot. I want to know what business problems we are trying to solve here with this category.
For sure. I mean, look, revenue intelligence is kind of becoming, it's the execution engine for growth. And that means something, and it's important, right? Because right now everyone's scrambling for growth. And that's the problem, right? We're looking for profitable growth that, enhances customer lifetime value. A lot of the analytics, a lot of the other, maybe even revenue platforms, which is another area that I cover, they might help you close deals. They might do pipeline inspection. But when you bring it all together into a kind of full journey orchestration that is really aimed at customer lifetime value, that's revenue intelligence. And that's why it's hot right now.
You're right. Margin compression is huge. It's causing everybody to figure out how to get to growth. Like literally 85% of the Fortune 500 is only growing at single digits. I mean, just think about that. That means 85% of the Fortune 500 should be reading this report because they're totally not growing and they're working 10x harder to stay still. It is out of control. So, okay. So who are the players? Not the vendors, but like, where are they coming from in the space? Are there pure plays? Are there companies that have been in the space that are just working their way into it? Are there companies, that are just acquired companies to be able to get into that space?
I think it's a little bit of all that. It's kind of a mix, right? You've got your RevOps people, that traditional guys who lived in the middle office, who are extending outward, really starting to take over kind of more of the sales process, bringing in more data sources, more analytics, right? Then you've got some of those kind of what I would call maybe even like legacy, like good platform CRM providers who can then take all that data and do a lot more cool stuff with it that then gives you that growth optimization, right? And then you do have a couple kind of what I would say, the interesting coming from like the sales operations, call recording, sales coaching, trying to become more of like, hey, we take all this stuff all these interactions and all this information and then and tell you what to do with it to optimize growth at the both, granular and macro level, right? So there's kind of like an interesting mix. Now, what I don't really get into much is a lot of those like I would call them kind of the AI native, and we might call them the AI exponentials, because some of them really haven't gotten there yet in terms of the maturity of what they've done, and they're just kind of coming in. But I'll be looking at them, and as the short list evolves and as my market overviews evolve, they'll probably be more included. But right now, it's kind of a lot of like evolution of legacy vendors.
This is great, right? I mean, we're going to keep seeing this kind of evolving of where revenue is headed. Now, who's buying this stuff, right? Is it the CEO? Is it a chief revenue officer? Is it someone that's like a director for demand gen? Like what are the buyers?
I mean, look, you might find a CMO who's picking it up, but really we're looking at chief revenue officers and that emerging concept of the chief growth officer, right? Where you have that either individual or committee that really does look at like the orchestration of growth, full journey, full life cycle, right? Where it's not just about hunting for new deals. It's not just about, your chief customer officer looking to maybe try to figure out how to sell and actually do expansion, right? It's really kind of giving that to someone who can own that. So it could be the expansion of ownership of kind of your RevOps and your middle office team, but also it's really like that chief growth officer, chief revenue officer, if they're not a chief sales officer, again, really focusing on revenue and not just deals. So that's really, because this has to be strategic, right?
This is exciting. Even before you joined, you've been talking about revenue intelligence, and this is like a hot area. So you've been like looking at the chief revenue officer, the chief growth officer.
Right.
What are 3 to 5 big trends in the space?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I mean, of course, it's agentic blank, right? And you can apply that to anything. Revenue intelligence is no different, right? Because that kind of is what really does pull it together to bring it from, again, pipeline inspection and all these kind of isolated but very important areas of the revenue lifecycle, but bringing them all together to create those workflows end to end and to break down those data silos, right? The agents are doing a lot of that work without a lot of disruption, right? So you can bring this revenue intelligence layer in conjunction with your existing CRM, MarTech, and other deployments. So that, that's a really big trend there, right? And then I think, some of the other areas that, you were really thinking about outside of that is like, to the AI to the next level is like This is some really, really specific things, and it's about critical stuff like your revenue, right? So don't just do these, DIY against generic LLM approaches. You really are seeing more and more usage of, I would say, kind of purpose-built AI and even domain-specific, smaller language models underneath some of these tools. Because again, this needs to not just be about generic AI. It needs to be about revenue, and then it needs to be about your revenue process and what's important to your business. So we're seeing much more specificity in the deployment of the AI, and both big and small growth teams partnering with those vendors for success because they have much more domain specific. It's like we talk about, right? Like, it's like expertise is easy, experience is not. That's why I'm covering a lot of these legacy guys, because they have that experience and they're bringing that into the AI. So that combination of like AI strength, but with specificity is getting to that precision data, right? And then the other trend is really like, how do we do quick wins? And this is why the revenue intelligence vendors, rather than a DIY approach, is really working, right? Because a lot of that purpose-built, pre-built agents, things like that, chief sales officers, chief revenue officers, chief growth officers, they're typically line of business people. They don't want to get under the hood. They don't want to build agents. They don't want to think about IT other than as something they consume, right? So it's really shifting the build versus buy, because they want more ownership, but they're not ready to get under the hood fully like, you would if you were just going to Claude and trying to build some revenue intelligence layer from scratch with cowork.
Well,
Right?
and these are pay fors, right? By putting them in, you're going to actually get some savings, get some growth to pay for it. So they're typically revenue neutral if you do these properly.
Exactly, and you've got some baselines that you can look to then go against and measure the ROI against, get quick wins, and actually look like, as a CRO or an aspiring chief growth officer, that you actually have a strategy for AI in place. You're not just doing it willy-nilly.
Definitely. Now, what should buyers ask for? I mean, among these vendors, it looked like from your report that they're getting there and they're not fully mature yet. Some have one thing, some have others. We'll talk about the vendors in a little bit, but like what should buyers be asking for?
Yeah, again, look, as you said, there's no kind of silver bullet. And look, and I go through a ton of requirements in the report, so I'm only going to give a few here, right? But one is, obviously you need like a lot of like multi-source and multi-type like data acquisition, and that needs to be automated, right? You need to be able to bring in data from far beyond your CRM to really get that customer view, the reality of your interaction. So that's got to be, call records, meetings, chat, email, every kind of interaction, plus third-party data, plus all the first-party data that wouldn't necessarily make it into your CRM without manual entry, and no one wants to do that, right? So that's a big one. Right?
I know a client that tried to get their AccuWeather feed tied to when the deals were closed because they wanted to see if there's a correlation. I mean, you never know. It was a sunny day and like 70% of their deals.
Gotcha. And then the obvious ones are like the agentic tools, right? Because you don't just want a bolted on Copilot or a prompt on the side, right? These need to be workflow driven, not just prompt driven. So, because again, we're really trying to get as autonomous as we can for the things that are like, super, super definitive, right? And then the things that are a little more probabilistic, you can work with them, right? But that's some of it. And then I think, obviously a little bit more of how do we leverage some of this to enable as close to like B2B self-service in ways that we really kind of couldn't before. So how do you immediately recognize who that customer is, what contracts and other things have they had and do have in place, so that immediately from a self-service perspective what the agent can offer up, and get as close to kind of closing and at least getting invoices and quotes together without a human having to get into the loop until we're finalizing kind of red lines and discounts. And even then, some of that can be done via the AI, right? So really kind of pushing self-service to the edges that we haven't before in a B2B scenario. That's the kind of things you're looking for, because that optimizes customer lifetime value, reduces, cost of sales, and really beefs up those margins.
Well, you mentioned a bunch of names: Clary, SalesLoft, Gong, Salesforce, Outreach, ZoomInfo, Conga, Sugar AI, Zoom Revenue Accelerator. You got a whole bunch of folks in here. It's a really good, important report. If you're looking for any kind of vendor selection, definitely ping Martin on this. He's the world expert on the space. More importantly, if your vendor is not featured here, let us know. We want to know what you're using. And if you're a vendor trying to get a hold of Martin, well, good luck. No, I was kidding. If you're a vendor trying to get a hold of Martin, just let us know. And if you meet this threshold, he'll definitely cover you. So that's kind of where we are. But revenue intelligence, it's a market overview that's recently put out. It is hot off the presses. And more importantly, you can get that on the constellationr.com website. And if you see this video, of course, please like and let us know about it. So, hey, thanks a lot, Martin. Thanks for being on here.
Yeah, thank you, Ray.